Good afternoon, one and all gathered here. So I welcome all the participants on behalf of Francis Xavier Engineering College, an autonomous institution, Tirunelveli. So I take this opportunity to welcome today's chief guest, Mr. A. Naresh Kumar, GIS technician, K-Cube Consultancy Services Private Limited, Bangalore. He has completed his Bachelor of Engineering in Geoinformatics from Anna University Regional Center, Tirunelveli. He has gained more than 3 years of experience in the GIS field and has been involved in many projects relating to data processing and analysis using these GIS applications. His research area includes GIS data analysis and management, remote sensing image interpretation and processing, water resource management, and hydrological investigation. So it's very happy for me to welcome you, sir. And now I
Thank you so much, sir.
HOD, sir, and I give the session to Mr. Naresh Kumar, sir. Sir, please, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction on me, and I hope. How do I start presenting in this?
Are you in laptop or mobile, sir?
I'm in laptop.
Okay, sir. And bottom screen, you will be showing that more options button near that.
Yeah, I got it, sir.
Yes, sir. Present now, there will be some option. So you can present your screen.
Okay. Yeah, 1 minute, sir. Yes. Is my screen visible to you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, is my presentation slides are
Yes, sir.
visible
It is visible, sir.
to you?
Let's go for the slideshow, sir. Sir, the screen is visible, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, yes, sir.
I
Screen is visible,
hope
sir.
my screen is visible to you all, guys. Hello.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir.
I think it's loading for you. Okay. So I want online SSS and GNSS. I think, sir. Yeah. Okay. So I'm myself, introducing Naresh Kumar from born and brought up in Salem, Tamil Nadu, and currently working in Bangalore, named as K-Cube Consultancy. Since 2006, K-Cube is constantly devoted to give high quality results and outputs in the global clients level. And we have been assigned with many training programs and actively participating in many training lectures on the students, guiding the and how pull them into the GIS technological and giving them new ideas and innovation techniques related to GIS and remote sensing. Mr. Kannan sir, for giving me this opportunity to participate in this wonderful training program. And before going into the topic, let me clearly mention that I want this to move on with as a discussion topics. So whenever I'm not audible or understandable, please stop me. Whenever you want any clarifications required on the contents of the slides and the topics. So And moreover, interaction session will always enlighten all the parties, both the ends and those who are listeners also. So let's proceed with the session now. So my topic is influence of atmosphere and remote sensing, atmospheric sounding, and applications of remote sensing in inland water and water cycle. So first of all, before going into the deeper contents of the remote sensing in atmosphere and what are the influences of atmosphere over the remote sensing data products and the remote sensing processes, and I hope on the end of the session of the phase 2, you are already well known of what is remote sensing is, and you know the definition also. And I don't and I do not like to repeat the theoretical part of definition, which is saying that remote sensing is an art and getting information from without touching the object or target and using the remote sensing. So now the simplest for those who needs some simplistic explanation, this picture is a overview of remote sensing. What is remote sensing? This remote sensing is nothing but a photography. If you see in this picture, a photographer holding his camera and the targeting towards a subject as the couple who are sitting on the rock. And what is the behind scientific scenarios present in this picture is present in the next one, and you can see this behind the scene. So this is what happens in the remote sensing also. The same process in a larger level, in the complex level. We are going to see a further of many definitions and many intricacies involved in this process, but this is the overall picture of remote sensing. First of all, the sunlight in this picture, sunlight acts as an energy source, and the sunlight is incident upon the subject, which is nothing but the couples present in here, and then the camera acts as a sensor which captures the light incident on the subject, and the reflected light travels through the propagation medium, which is nothing but the atmosphere, and captured in the sensor as a pixelated format. Remote sensing deals with mostly the remote sensing raster images, and the raster images units are pixels, nothing but the rectangular or square formulated units. Each pixel stores the light information, reflected light information on it, and differentiating what is the subject and what are the properties of the subject. You can see how many pixels are stored in this picture, and I hope everybody is using smartphones nowadays, and you can see what the megapixel is. The number of pixels can be stored in a single picture. The higher resolution pictures means that more details of the subjects can be noted, and the lower resolution means less number of information is noted. And mainly the remote sensing deals with the resolution of these data products in 3 ways. One is spatial resolution, one is spectral resolution, and another is temporal resolution. We may see further in the slides what are the 3 resolutions and how they play important role in fixing the data qualities. So now moving on to the next one. Before going into deeper, and there are the remote sensing can be broadly classified into 2 types. One is active remote sensing and passive remote sensing. In this sessions or in the program, if you have learned about microwave remote sensing, you would have a good idea of what is active remote sensing and what is passive remote sensing. In general way, most of the remote sensing satellites work on the passive remote sensing method, and the microwave remote sensing and the radar sat are the few examples of active remote sensing, which in the picture itself you can see clearly the illumination of source light comes from a sensor itself, which means the sensor itself gives the incident light, and it hits the target and gets the reflected light back into the sensor. Whereas in passive remote sensing, the sunlight acts as a natural illumination source, which from the sunlight travels through the atmosphere and gets hits on the target, and there are certain mechanisms occurs when the incident of the target, and then the light reflects to the sensor, and the sensor captures the reflected light. So this is the main difference between passive and active remote sensing, which is the source of light is sunlight used in the passive remote sensing, whereas active remote sensing, the collecting sensor itself emits the incident light. Now, so the first picture and the second picture, you can see the overall demonstration. Now, this is the somewhat deeper explanations on each steps of the remote sensing. This is an overview of remote sensing, and you can see each steps as alphabetic names. First one is A. As I said, the illumination source. In our case, the passive, most of the cases, passive remote sensing, sun is the illumination source, whereas the sun the B part is where the incident light is traveling through the atmosphere, and the C is the interactions of the incident light with the target, which is nothing but the Earth features. Anyway, any any number of features can be incidental upon the light. And now again one more thing is, for the active remote sensing there is another B, which is that the sensor produces the incident light, and after the light travels from the A to the, which is the source, to through the atmosphere B and incident upon the C, and then the reflected light goes back to the sensor, whereas the D is nothing but capturing and storing the reflected electromagnetic spectrum, so which is the radiation light. So the reflected light is stored in the sensor, and then again it transmitted or emitted to the ground station, where it is collected and it is ready to be getting pre-processed, and those are the steps E. And then from the step E, which is the stored and the raw data will be processed and analyzed, and the noise reduction and those kind of stuff will be happening in F, which is the removal of noise and speckle reduction and other things. Those are all nothing but removal of uncertainties in the image. And final step is the important step. The hardships that we went through A, B, and C, and D, and E, F. The final product will be used in the G, where the scholars and scientists come into the play, where they use these images to solve a new problem, to raise a new question, or to give solutions to the modern problems, like nature related problems like water flooding, and what are the water conditions, and water quality measurements, and any number of applications of remote sensing. This is the overall generic process of remote sensing. So now in this coverage in the session, particularly we are going to concentrate on the part of A to B and B to C and C to D, which is the atmospheric interactions of light waves or the light sources, and how it travels through the propagation medium, which is the atmosphere, how it hits the Earth surface features, and what are the mechanisms occurring at the time of heating, and how it disperses back, and how it's reflected back to the sensor. And this is the part where we are mostly concentrating, as the topic is influence of atmosphere. So now this is the overall idea of electromagnetic spectrum. You know, the light source coming through is combinedly called as electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic spectrum travels in the light speed, and the two important features are the wavelength and the frequency. As you already know, the shorter wavelength has more frequency, and higher wavelength have lower frequency. So you can see that the first point nodes penetrates Earth's surface, which is the electromagnetic spectrum is divided into slots, and each slot like visible regions or slots. Visible region, short wave region, and long wave region, and those which can be penetrated through the Earth atmosphere is termed as Y, and those region which cannot penetrate through the Earth atmosphere as N. You can see the longer waves beyond the radio waves and the radio wave frequency region and the microwave region can be partially penetrated through the Earth's surface, and you can see that after the ultraviolet part of region, X-rays and gamma rays and ultraviolet rays cannot be penetrating to the Earth because of few reasons, which we are going to see in the further slides. And now these are the different kinds of Earth features which emits at that scale level of wavelength, and these are the different temperatures of the rays. And now you know what is electromagnetic spectrum and what are the sources, what are the available sources. So now, irrespective of the source, the light travels through the atmosphere. First it's the atmosphere, right? So there are four important mechanisms happen in the light rays which are hitting the Earth atmosphere until it reaches to the Earth's features. First one is absorption. Absorption is nothing but the incident light is completely absorbed into the atmospheric influences like hazes, water vapor, dust, cloud particles, and aerosols. Those are all the atmospheric influences which cause the disturbances in the traveling of incident light. So absorption means absorbing the light, and you can see it in the picture. It does not pass through after that stage to the next level, which is the atmosphere, to travel through the propagation. Next one is the reflection, which is an important part because reflection is a part of mechanism where the entire remote sensing techniques work. So reflection, if there is no reflection, then the entire sensor collection team and everything would be screwed. So this phenomenon is called reflection, which is nothing but the light travels through the atmosphere and hits some of the aerosols or that object, and it jumps to the other direction. So the light which jumps to the other direction is called reflected light, and all the sensors which are embedded in the satellite systems and revolving on the Earth collect this reflected light and measure on the various processes involved in it, which we are going to see. And the next one is transmission. Transmission is nothing but that light travels through the object and goes to the other side of the object, which is, you can see that there is a slight bending in the light rays and it goes to the other direction, which is also not usable in, mostly probably is not usable in remote sensing techniques. Another important stuff is scattering. So the main influences of atmosphere over the remote sensing processes is the scattering process, which disturbs the light, and the attenuation of the light is greater with just greater scattering techniques. So in future slides, we are going to see about the scattering. So the types of scattering, as I said, you can see in this right side top picture, the EMR source, electromagnetic radiation source, emit lights, and one of the factors is absorption and the emission. And after absorption, you can see there are several ways of scattering is happening. You can see in the picture that the scattering is occurring at the different places, and in some places that seem to be empty, but still the scattering occurs because those are called aerosols, atmospheric influence. And then cloud is also a part of aerosol where the incident light is getting scattered at the different positions. So based on three phenomena, this scattering is broadly classified into three types. One is Rayleigh scattering, Mie scattering, and non-selective scattering. Rayleigh scattering, all this scattering depends upon the diameter or the size of the particles which deflects the light. The diameter of the particles or the size of the particles which deflects the light in the atmosphere. The next one is what is the type of wavelength which is incident upon those objects. And the third one is what is the distance between the source, atmosphere, and the targeted Earth surface. In this you can see first one is Rayleigh scattering. Rayleigh scattering is nothing but when the diameter or the size of the objects is very small when compared to the wavelength of the light which is incident upon it. At that time, an equally distributed light rays will be dispersed from that point, and that is called Rayleigh scattering. And in the below picture, you can see there are two sides of the skies, and one is red and another one is blue. These two effect, one is probably the sunset and another one is reaching up to that sunset level. So the basic phenomenon of sky being blue in the daytime, and at the evening time the sunset or sunrise time, the sky is being red. Those two phenomena are because of Rayleigh scattering. What happens in Rayleigh scattering is it mostly absorbs the longer wavelengths and re-emits the shorter wavelengths. In the electromagnetic spectrum, you can see that the electromagnetic spectrum of visible level starts from the 0.4 to 0.7, and after that it will be infrared region, and then NIR and thermal IR, and then 1 mm to 1 meter will be the microwave region, and beyond that it will be radio wave region. So in those visible region, you see our native remote sensors, which is nothing but the eyes, always observes only the visible region. So the visible region starts with the color violet, and ends with the color red. So in that visible region, the shorter wavelength starts from the violet, and those longer wavelength will be red. So what happens is, in the daytime, due to the distance between the source, which is nothing but the sun, and the Earth surface, the topmost atmospheric interactions happening, and at that time the Rayleigh scattering reflects the blue color alone. Other colors will get absorbed because of their wavelength and their tendency to behave. So what happens is the sky is becoming blue, and when the distance over the passes, which means the sun moves away from the Earth, or the Earth will be revolving and the distance will be increased. So while the distance will be increasing and going further, at the time of sunset, the longer wavelength, which is red, will be the only one left to be scattered, and others will be completed. So those are the reasons why the sky is blue in the daytime and the sky is red at the sunset time. Another scattering type is Mie scattering. Mie scattering is a phenomenon happening when the objects which are all getting hitted through the EMR source will be the diameter of the size of the particle will be equal to the wavelength. So that is the Mie scattering. Same phenomenon happening in the Mie scattering. All the other wavelengths which are other than the wavelengths will be scattered and are observed. So based on the size and the distance plays an important role in the scattering process. And then the third one is the non-selective scattering. As the name suggests, it equally distributes the light which is incident upon on it, and based on the conditions that the diffusing particles, the scattering particles have the size more than the incident light wavelength. So that is the phenomenon of non-selective scattering. This is the reason why water vapor and cloud are in white color, because it almost all the wavelengths in the visible region will get absorbed and it becomes white color. No color will be scattered from that phenomenon. So that is why the clouds are seen as white. And you can see in this picture how cloud is diffusing the light. And in the absorption part, there is one further mentioning this. The three important influence of our absorption mechanism is ozone, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. So ozone is present in the troposphere part of the Earth, and when the sunlight comes in, the longer wavelengths, the shorter wavelengths, which is the gamma and ultraviolet radiations, are getting completely absorbed by the ozone particles present in the atmosphere. Imagine if there is no ozone to absorb the shorter wavelengths, the heatness present associated with the sunlight will be more, and our skin will be getting burnt. So that is the importance of ozone, and there is a phenomenon acting beyond absorbing the ultraviolet radiations, and it sends only the shorter wavelength, which is the infrared, visible, and other part of microwave regions. So other one is carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide has a predominant name called greenhouse gas because it absorbs the longer wavelengths and somewhat the shorter wavelengths. So that's why the heat is getting absorbed at that atmospheric level, and the carbon dioxide plays a major role in customizing the temperature of Earth. And the third one is water vapor. Water vapor absorbs the air pressure measured. The air pressure is more where the water vapor is present, and because of that, normal shorter wavelengths also cannot be entered. So that's why in the desert region you can see the air is light and the water vapor presence is very low at the desert region, and whereas in the tropical forest you can see the air will be hazy, and the pictures taken in there will be a hazy tendency. Now you have seen the absorption, transmission, and scattering. The important part as next one is reflection. As I told you, the fourth phenomenon is reflection of light incident upon the Earth atmosphere. The reflection is broadly classified into two types. One is specular reflection, another one is diffuse reflection. This reflection plays a major role in characterizing the remote sensing processes. So because all the sensors, as I told you, will collect only the reflected light. So the reflection on the Earth surface, Earth atmosphere, depends on mainly the type of wavelength incident upon the surface and what is the surface type property, whether it is smooth, whether it is rough. So those kinds of roles play a major part in the reflection theory. So the specular reflection is nothing but when the reflection happens, the incident of the light will always go to the opposite side of the reflection. So the reflection light will always go to the opposite side of the incident light direction. So that is why the surface should be smooth. So the smoother surface reflection is called specular reflection, and the diffuse reflection will scatters at all the direction because the surface roughness is more. All the Earth features are classified from perfectly specular to perfectly diffuse, which means the most smoother and the most harder part of the rougher part of the features. features. So all the earth features lies in between one of these two techniques. And if you see, this is the main reason why the reflection is the main reason why each particular to our eyes, each particular features will be seen in different colors. For example, the commonly presented Earth atmospheric features are leaves and water. Let us consider those two. First of all, if you see in this picture, you can see all the visible wavelength are incident upon the leaves. Only the green is reflected back to the ice, because there is a presence of chlorophyll, a chemical pigment and that chlorophyll is in the visible region, and so that is the leaves of the tree always look green to our. If you see there are other leaves which is not visible to infrared region, so we can naked only the remote sensing sensor capture infrared reactions and get the information from it. So this greenness defines the major role in the remote sensing playing in the.
So dear participants, kindly wait. I think some network problem for sir. So kindly wait. Let me check and come.
Hello. Is there any hindrances in the? Shall I continue? Hello. Okay. So I hope I'm
Yes, sir. You can
okay.
continue,
Yeah.
sir.
I thought some meeting has ended. It. Okay. Okay. So now I'm continuing with the atmospheric windows. As I said, you can see that gases absorb electromagnetic energy in very specific region of the spectrum. They influence where we can look in the remote sensing purpose. So remote sensing purpose does not work in all the electromagnetic spectrum regions. Only at a particular region they work best. So instead of working on all the regions unnecessarily and spending on more money and efforts on collecting the informations of all this electromagnetic spectrum, we are concentrating on the atmospheric window regions, which is those areas of spectrum which are heavily influenced by the atmospheric absorption and thus are useful for remote sensors. So, yeah,
Sir, excuse me, sir. Sir, presentation is not visible, sir.
presentation is not useful. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I think that presentation got cut off in that. Is it visible now? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for that. Thank you for the warning. So those areas of the spectrum which are heavily influenced by the atmospheric absorption and thus are useful for remote sensors is called atmospheric windows. So if you, in this picture you can see that the UV and the other parts except the visible and infrared regions does not have the transmission ratio to 100%. So the best part in there where the remote sensing process works is visible region and infrared region, and beyond that microwave region. This microwave region is something different which we will be seeing in another session. Maybe or you would have already seen what is microwave remote sensing. So here we are going to concentrate on the visible region spectrum part and the infrared region part where the transmission is higher, which means this at this part the remote sensing sensors can take advantage of getting the reflected light easily because the incident light is fully incident on the earth surface without any absorption or influences from the atmosphere. So you can see remote sensing not only taking advantage of visible spectrum, which is red, green, and blue, but also non-visible light. To our naked eyes, this infrared is not visible. If if infrared is visible to our eyes, the trees would be very bright because of the infrared reflection. So that is why in any typical remote sensing product, which is an image, you can see the vegetation will be in white color and the water absorbs the infrared regions. So that's why the water is looks black in the remote sensing images. So this now we know why this is happening and at which part of the wavelength it is happening and which part of wavelength we need to work on. So based on this, the scientists have developed a specific pattern for for almost all the earth atmospheric or earth surface features. So those features reflect or behave at a certain pattern by in reflecting the light and in the incident EMR on them. So those specific patterns of reflection is called spectral signature of that feature. For example, if you take vegetation type 1, you can see in here, this is the reflectance value, and this y-axis is the reflectance value and x-axis is the wavelength. In this you can see there are two types of vegetation, one bare soil, one turbid water, and one clear water, which are commonly found earthly features. So vegetation 1 type, you can see it that 0.4, which is the blue, it just rises from there and it gets increased at the 0.5 to 0.6 micrometer, which is green, and then it has a dip at the red region, and again in the infrared region you can see the sudden spike on that. Whereas in bare soil, you can see from all through the visible region, it just has a straight line as with a slight increase. So these patterns are constant for those type of features. So based on this pattern behavior, scientists use this behavior pattern called spectral signature and uses for various applications, like in terms of vegetation means what is the water content in the vegetation, and if there is more water content, you will never see the reflectance value getting higher because water absorbs the visible results and blue light will be reflected. So that's why the healthier vegetation and will be healthier vegetation versus the vegetation under stress or vegetation that is going to die can be classified based on the spectral signature, and you can see the water pattern behavior. It just starts at the visible region blue. So you can see that the blue region is higher, whereas as the wavelength passes at the other parts of the visible spectrum, the water value is getting low. So this is one of the keynote behavior pattern in remote sensing, and all the image collection and the image processing techniques depend on these values, and the sensor calibration is done based on to observe the peak values at each spectrum of this. For example, if you want to observe vegetation, what is the best guess is get the green light absorber to be the highest value and then work on the infrared region instead of working at the lower level of values in like blue and or red. So these are the spectral signature of each features. So now I have added the some certain slots in the slots that are present in the sensor. This is the simplest form of depiction how sensor works. So you can see, the light reflecting from a incident on the Earth surface features and reflection is constant. But what differs is the capability of sensor to collect the information. So you can see in this the top left one, you can see blue, green, red, NIR, MIR, and thermal IR. Okay, so this sensor has the capability to get these band informations from the reflected light. So the all four of them has the vegetation pattern of spectral signature. Now let's imagine we put in this same area, we can start putting like this bare soil reflection. You can see, right? So what happens is, this is how the sensor differs or distinguish between different features of the Earth. So the atmospheric interaction gives away specific spectral signature of each features, right? So you can easily guess with this type of in the NIR region, when the feature reflects this much of reflectance, you can easily say there is a vegetation feature, and if it has the constant growth on a constant straight line on the reflectance value, then it is a bare soil. So that is the one part of the sensors capturing spectral signature, and the other part is the capability of sensor. You can see in the compare the right side top and right side bottom, and you can see what the width of the NIR. So the NIR collecting capacity is very wide in that bandwidth for that particular sensor. What happens is all the features which is falling from the here to here will average those values. So those averaging is not good for high quality analysis. So averaging happens in wider bandwidth, and this sensor is a typical example of multispectral sensor, which has a few number of bandwidths to collect information. All the reflected light will be stored in that particular set of bandwidths, and particularly in NIR, the difference between the each object's finding will be difficult. For example, you can say that is based on the peak value, you can say that is a part of the vegetation, but you can never say which type of vegetation in it. So that's why the new technology has been raised called hyperspectral. So you can see the number of slots in each bandwidth, and you can see the thinness of the values collection. So what happens is at this particular point of collection, only the feature which has highest polygon values will be collected instead of averaging. So each slot will differ each patterns. So that's how we distinguish easily in the hyperspectral than in the multispectral. But then we can think that why we are using multispectral instead of hyperspectral. The hyperspectral arrangements in the sensors are very sophisticated and time consuming and space consuming. The launch of satellite mainly depends on the less weight and the less space consuming sensors will be preferred always. And the operating cost is also one more hurdles of getting the hyperspectral images. This is one of the cool picture which I found in the internet, and you can from this picture you can see who's multispectral and who is hyperspectral. For boys, mostly we use red, purple, pink as a constant colors. Only set of colors we can find it from the light. Okay, so whereas the like when it comes to women, they always be keen on getting more number of colors. You can see that, right? So these colors are that is the hyperspectral and the multispectral. The capacity of observing different colors is more in hyperspectral than in the multispectral. Color classification, another example is you can see in this hair comb. There is the two sides of hair comb. One has the width, higher bandwidth, and the other one has thin width. So these number of colors can be captured from hyperspectral sensors, and only this many 5 or 6 colors can be captured in multispectral. And I have given an example of Cartosat 3 multispectral sensor, which has higher resolution, higher spatial resolution. You can see this number of colors capturing capacity is called a spectral, moreover a spectral resolution, whereas spatial resolution is something different, which we will see in later. So you can see band 1 blue, green, and band 3 red, and band 4 NIR. And what are the wavelength present in the Cartosat 3, which is an Indian satellite, and the resolution is constant as spatial resolution 1.4 meter, 1.14 meter, and the swath width is nothing but a width of the single picture taken upon the Earth's surface. That is the swath width of that picture. Okay. Now this is the false color composite. Another one term called false color composite. Now you know each color values are recorded in each band, right? So band 3, 4, 5 will be in blue, green, and red. When we want to distinguish the colors more in depth, and the features should be classified in more in-depth manner, we are manually assigning different colors for the bands. For example, swapping the band value 4 as a red and a green as 5. So what happens is different colors will be done. In this picture, you can easily see the water. You can see the water is dark, and the other forest areas is red, and this light red will be vegetation, and these are all some aerosol particles and cloud covers. You can see that, right? So this is the use of false color composite. Please do not confuse this with the color values observed from the sensor. This is a manual swapping of colors. And this another important thing is, what are all these factors influencing the disturbing the remote sensing process? Is water vapor, haze, and pollutants, which are all combinedly called as aerosols, influence the reflected light. This picture, can you see anything clearly other than the bigger building? No, right? So this is the noise presence in the image. Noise is nothing related to sound here. This is noise means the error. The amount of error is more higher in the picture because of the presence of haze and pollutants in the atmosphere. So now to overcome these pollutions and the other things, that is why the microwave remote sensing is coined, because it has a tendency to penetrate through the influence and the other aerosol particles and get a clear picture of an incident on the Earth surface, and will reflect back the waves incident on it and get the feature properties. So another one important factor is, depending on the elevation of the platform, the effects of atmosphere also differ. For example, if you decide to collect drone images, it will never have the air contained because of cloud cover. But if you take a geosynchronous satellite or other troposphere satellite, orbital satellite, you will obviously have to face the error because of cloud, which is the most annoying work in the remote sensing image acquisition. And there are tedious steps of algorithms and methodologies to be followed to remove the cloud cover errors from the images. So that's why we are telling, depending on the elevation of the platform, the effects of atmosphere are different. So now I have clubbed together the overall effects of atmosphere in the remote sensing or the remote sensing products. Atmospheric composition causes wavelength dependent absorption and the scattering. And atmospheric the errors created from the because of the influence of the atmosphere depends upon the absorption and the scattering mechanism, and also the wavelength dependent. It is because purely wavelength dependent. As I told you, how the longer wavelength and shorter wavelength play differently in the different load. For example, the troposphere will never allow the shorter wavelength first of all come into the mesosphere or stratosphere. So that's how the wavelength dependent absorption scattering plays a role. Another effect is atmospheric effects degrade the qualities of images. So the image quality is mainly depends upon the atmospheric conditions. So that's why we always coin the term called ideal conditions for image acquisition. Or if you are working on as a vegetation researcher, so the best time to collect data is you have to firstly fix it. Or the best time to image acquisition is the first and foremost fixing of any processes, because bad timing, the data collected at the bad timing with a lot of haze and the cloud cover is actually none of the use. So that's why the ideal conditions should be followed. Like vegetation means summer is the best one. Without cloud cover intention, we can collect in the image based noise, hazy appearance, adjacency effect, and blurring in the image are the common form of noises because of the influence of atmosphere. And the next one is some atmospheric effects are corrected before image is analyzed and interpreted. Like as I told you, fixing the ideal conditions. By fixing the ideal conditions or less cloud cover, the image acquisition will be greater advantage, and it will provide you more benefit when instead of removing after collection. Another one is it is also decreasing the contrast of the image. The color depth of the features will greatly affect due to the presence of aerosols and other things in the atmosphere. So now, influence of atmosphere, I will cover the basic terms and terminologies, as too much in-depth formulations and removing techniques are not concentrated, because those things are you can learn in the further sessions or any other opportunities you can learn. But this is the basic overview of all the remote sensing patterns and processes overall. Now we are moving to the atmospheric sounding systems. Now the satellite is being launched and getting the climatology and the weather prediction is easier. Why do we need atmospheric sounding systems to collect the data? Because the intense or severe weather conditioning cannot be used by satellite collection, and the temporal nothing but the of a satellite over the features is a drawback. So what we have to do is short-term weather forecasting. Conventional forecasting is called short-term forecasting, like hailstorm will be affecting, and it will start and affect in a couple of weeks or days itself. So those kinds of observations will be made in atmospheric sounding systems. You can see in this picture what are the techniques they are following. They have a ground station which will inflate the balloon, and which will always track the sensors. And this right hand picture is the sensor. You can see that, right? This is a sensor which has the instruments to collect pressure, water vapor, temperature, humidity, those kind of collections. So this is the upsonde. This is called upsonde in the radio sonde. Radio sonde is nothing but the instrument which is used to collect these atmospheric soundings is called radio sonde. And based on the operation methods and how it is launched and how it is getting back, those kind of things are classified into 3 types. So before that, this is the goal of the atmospheric sounding, which is obtaining a near vertical profile of atmospheric pressure, temperature, and the wind structure for use in both nowcasting and forecasting. So this is the term called nowcasting, because the shortest distance, 1 hour before the climate news will be given to the sailors or some others. Forecasting is a short term, a couple of hours before or a couple of days before the forecasting is used. So other simulation, the advantages atmospheric sounding is it can assimilate data on global level and regional numerical forecast models, and the methods are based on which the atmospheric sounding is collected are balloon based radio sondes, aircraft based radio sondes, commercial aircraft, remote sensing. Remote sensing is the highest level, and which we always talked about in the previous slides, and also we are going to talk about in the further slides. And other balloon and aircraft based are discussed in the further slides. Now you can see the outline of atmospheric sounding is upsondes, downsondes, and experimental sounding systems. Based on the process which the atmospheric sounding is collected, 3 types of atmospheric soundings are there. One is upsondes, weather balloons. You can see what I'm meaning is weather balloon are nothing but it will have a helium filled balloon or hydrogen filled balloon which will be launched upon to the crossing stratosphere, which is up to 10 kilometers, and after it enters the mesosphere, because of the pressure or conditioning, it will burst out, and the sensor will fall with the support of small parachute tied upon it. So while dropping down, the sensors in the transmitter will start collecting the pressure, temperature, what is the humidity in that, and those are all recorded at the various kinds of methodologies, and those fields also will be seen in the future one. These are the main components. One is balloon, another one is sensor package. This is a sensor package, and another one is this navigational teleguided system to know the current location of the sensor, and other one is wind estimation and exposure errors. These are all the main components of the upsondes, which is the weather balloons, and we will be seeing downsondes separately, and the experimental soundings there are 2-3 types. We will be seeing in the further slides. And before going into the types, what are the collection things that occur in the atmospheric sounding? One is pressure. Definitely, pressure will be collected, atmospheric pressure, and then temperature, and then humidity and wind speed. Altitude or time and the latitude longitude positions will be always known by the navigation satellites, which will always have it touch with the sensor through the GPS or GNSS. So the pressure, temperature, and humidity and wind speed are the parameters which are the data which are mainly collected by the radio sondes. Next one is mandatory level. The atmospheric pressure levels at which the radio sondes are required to report are, these are the atmospheric levels. First of all, at the surface level, it will record a data, and then it will start reach to the top, and from the top to the down, it will whenever the pressure changes from 1000 MB to 925 MB, it will collect the data, and then to 850 MB. MB is millibars, unit of pressure. So that occurs starts from the tropospheric levels, and then the significant levels at which are these are all the basic mandatory ones. There are also specially customized ones for a specific pattern, like abnormally there will be a huge hurricane or something like that. Those times we can collect data from wherever from this condition is matching. When is temperature begins to increase or decrease with the height, humidity begins to increase or decrease with the height, and wind speed begins to increase or decrease with the height. So these are all the important things we need to know before the getting into the atmospheric sounding. And next one, now we know the balloon is going up, collecting data, and it is coming, while coming down, it is collecting data. How do we visualize or analyze this data? What are the techniques? The most common one pattern plotting is skew T log P diagram, which is the plot diagram, which is the most simplest and most common, and it is the first and foremost technique and diversified techniques. And the advantage is quick visual analysis. The relation between the temperature and pressure will be plotted immediately. The relationship between the dew point and the pressure will be plotted immediately, and the precipitation will be plotted immediately. So the data values from the transmitter will be recorded on a graph sheet, and it will be easy to know which are the current status of the records. And then another technique is lifted parcels and stability index. This is mainly used in thunderstorm or conventional forecasting. The lifespan of these indices will be starts from 30 minutes to 4 hours. So the convection forecasting is nothing but the shorter term of forecasting. Just the event will be occurring a few hours after that. And then the third one is thermodynamic quantities. It is mainly depends upon the equations and many complex theories and the formulas, and mainly it denotes the thermal relations between the pressure and humidity, how it getting changed with the base on height variation. So this is the analysis and display of radio sonde sounding devices. And next one, the details of upsondes, which is the weather balloons. The upsondes means that it goes from the upward motion from the down up from the surface, and it reaches, and then the balloon will get burst, and it will get downward after collecting by collecting the information all the way down. So the balloon latex weighting will be differing from 200 gram to 1000 gram, and the gas which is filled is called lift gas. So the gas will be much more pressure, has more atmospheric pressure than the normal air. So that's why it is getting upward. And the two common type of gases are called helium and hydrogen. And nowadays, hydrogen is overcoming the helium. The balloon ascends and expands until it reaches and bursts the altitude of the stratosphere. And then the radio sonde package descends by parachute. The main drawback in this upsondes are very few balloons are recovered, or the transmitters are recovered, because the data will be frequently transmitted. But once it reaches to the downward, the forces will get destroyed. The transmitter will get destroyed by the landing forces. And this is the downsonde. Downsondes are the advanced antenna, has an advanced antenna and advanced sensors, and it will be dropped down from the well constructed aircrafts. It will have a launch tube, and when the aircraft reaches to the higher level, which is generally more than the balloon which would reach, and from there through the launch tube, the balloon, the parachute with the instrument package will be dropped down. So the same mechanism, while coming down, the temperature, pressure, humidity will be calculated. The spatial radio sonde is launched from high altitude aircraft and descend from the controlled rate using a parachute, only deployed over the ocean. So that is another drawback in this. And also advantage also, that is one. Mostly hurricanes and hailstorms are formed from the ocean surface. So to get the localized information about the movement of the hurricane of these downsondes are most probably preferred. Only used during the targeted observation effort designed to improve high impact forecasts. and the severe weather events or natural disasters. So that's what I said. And experimental sounding systems are, these two are conventional, balloon and the GPS sondes. Now, this experimental sounding systems are rocket sondes, which is the same antenna and the unit, transmitter unit will be filled in the rocket, and it will reach up to the most higher level at the crossing the mesosphere, and it will go up to 120 kilometers, where balloons cannot ascend naturally because of the air pressure is not there. Once the rocket reaches to its maximum altitude, the sensor package descends using a square cone parachute, which is seen in this image. So the main use case of this rocket sondes are ozone studies, volcanic emissions, and radioactivity, Earth magnetic field studies, and cosmic rays, and mesospheric chemistry. So these are all the use cases where these rocket sondes are used. And another one is glider sondes, which glides like a drone. This is looks like a mini drone. And the Data Bird is a type of glider sondes manufactured by GPS Boomerang company. And the key advantages over this glider sondes compared with the other sounding systems are, it is reusable because it has a GNSS or GPS location tracking device embedded on it, and it will always glide back through the atmosphere and reaches to the surface without no damaging. And then the expected savings, because other three methods are almost irrecoverable, so the expected savings are $100,000 per year, and the altitude ascends to 1 hour to the maximum in a simple 1 hour, and the descents in 30 minutes. The faster data recordings are done, and it measures pressure, temperature, humidity, and winds using proprietary sensors. And the major remaining hurdle in this is airspace restriction. The airflow and the airspace restriction causes this instrument to deflect, and then the recordings will be misplaced with the wrong values. So that is an important hurdle in this glider stones. And this one is somewhat, this picture is not as it is. This is such a clear picture to make you better understanding what is student sonde. Still in development. I hope this will not be reach the greater success as this glider sonde and rocket sonde, because human lives are more valuable than the data collection. So inexpensive. See, they mentioned inexpensive because volunteers will be mentioned, no health insurance will be given, and there will be voluntary action. Main hurdle is getting the student to survive at upper altitudes, which is the cold and low oxygen environment. So these are all the experimental sounding systems. And now we are moving on to the further topics of the session, which is importance of inland atmospheric applications, applications of remote sensing in inland water and water cycle. So before going into that, we first have to have an idea of water. Water is a life source of living beings, all of the living beings in the earth. And you may think that earth is completely surrounded by water, and still we are worried about water because the amount of fresh water is less than 3%. And in the further decades, the last 2-3 decades, the water crisis is getting increased at the alarming rate than any other resources management. So hence, the remote sensing plays a major role in the water conservation, particularly in inland waters, which are the fresh waters. So inland water bodies are critical freshwater resources for both human and ecological systems. As you know, early civilization of humans always started at the by side of water, because they have found that water is an invaluable resource for living. So all the freshwater resources are very critical to the humans and ecological systems. So they are paramount importance in sustaining all forms of life. Surface water bodies are dynamic in nature. Before considering it, if the human interference factors are removed, the water will always naturally get shrink or increased based on the natural processes that is given. So what we have to do is, instead of maintaining the amount of the surface water bodies, we have to maintain the balance between the cycling of process of water bodies getting shrink and or expand. And we have to slowly, gradually remove the human interfaces, which is the factories and other human-made errors. So surface water bodies are dynamic in nature as they shrink, expand, and or change their appearances or course of flow with time. So owing to different natural and human induced factors. So these are all the importance of inland water. And this picture, you can see that the light fluorescent green is part of a world where the land became to water, and the green spots are called water became to land. Of course, the land became into water, the water became into land. Both are actually natural processes unless and until it becomes in a controlled manner. You can see in here, the next points are surface water refers to water on the surface of earth, such as river, lake, wetland, and the ocean. So these are all the surface waters, and particularly we're going to concentrate on the inland waters and how the remote sensing greatly helps in the assessing and monitoring those inland waters here. Observation of surface water is a functional requirement of studying ecological and hydrological processes. Hydrological process is nothing but water cycling processes, which is dealt in the few further slides. Because before that, studying ecological balance will always give us the prosperity and maintain the proper usage of resources of the earth. Observation of surface water is greatly done with the help of remote sensing. The conventional methods of field sample collection and other techniques are mostly tedious and time consuming. So that's why remote sensing approaches have been started. Since remote sensing approaches have been started, like nearly 50 years back itself, we have started assessing the inland water quality and the water monitoring using the remote sensing approaches. In this section, we are going to discuss about mainly detecting, extracting, and monitoring surface water using remote sensing, especially progresses in last decade. In the last decade has been a golden period for remote sensing, and particularly in terms of water analysis. So why we are concentrating on detecting, extracting, and monitoring surface water? These are all combinedly called as the various remote sensing processes involved in the water, related to water, and also instead of just giving you out about the just generic terms of applications, this is the best way to learn what are the back end happening in the those associated with the applications. Of course, remote sensing is used in water content mapping, water flow mapping, and the agricultural part, and what are the water change direction, or water is getting increased or not. These are all the generic application, but the basic happening in that is giving in the periodical manner or order, like detecting is the first step, extracting and monitoring the surface water using remote sensing. Now, why applications of remote sensing is important in inland water is remote sensing or technology offers effective ways to observe surface water's dynamics. Compared to traditional in situ measurements, remote sensing is much more efficient as the workforce is very less. The another important advantages over the conventional methods are given in here, like because remote sensing data products provide continuous monitoring of earth surfaces. There is a continuous pattern of orbiting around the earth, and the same place or the same feature will be covered again and again in a periodical manner. And those revisiting period is mainly called as temporal resolution of a satellite. And the next one is spatially explicit. It is very good at spatial providing the spatial information of the features. And the next one is temporally frequent observation data we can get. Instead of now the natural calamities may happen and the field observation cannot be held out, or the human errors, those will be neglected, and it will always give a temporarily fixed frequent observation data using remote sensing over the inland water assessment. Now, what are the sensors, satellite sensors for inland waters? So for inland waters means the water quality assessment and the water the monitoring techniques involves many kinds of satellite data, which are broadly classified into two types: optical sensor and micro sensor. Optical sensor is nothing but what we saw in the reflection part of the session, how the light is getting reflected, and those are the optical behavior of this EMR, electromagnetic radiation incident on Earth and reflecting back to the sensor. Based on that principle, the optical sensors are working. Micro sensor is mostly active remote sensing, which is it has its own source of light, and it emits that light and it waves, and it get back the waves and get the properties of the features. So now we are going to see about optical remote sensing. The important part of optical remote sensing are visible. It works in the visible region, near infrared region, and short wave infrared region to form images of Earth's surface by detecting solar radiation reflected from the targets on the ground. Different materials reflect and absorb different wavelength, spectral signature. These are the main two principles behind the working of optical remote sensor. So optical remote sensors are having focus in this section because of main three reasons. One is due to data availability, spatial, and temporal resolution. Micro sensor are still in the experimental phase while when it comes to the real world applications. So we have differentiated and concentrated more on the further slides in the optical sensors. So spatial resolution is nothing but the pixel size, how much information in the real world features can be stored in a pixel. So higher resolution spatial resolution means more number of information will be gained for about the properties, and lower spatial resolution means less number of information. The distinguishing of the features will be somewhat difficult in lower spatial resolution. Temporal resolution is nothing but the revisiting time or the orbital speed of that satellite sensor and making it covering the same features again and again. So another one is data availability. There are n number of, there is 15:1 ratio of microwave sensors and optical sensors available on the current Earth atmosphere. Because of these three reasons, optical sensors are given importance in the water quality assessment and inland water assessments. So it's still we need to know what is microwave remote sensor. This is the overall view of the microwave remote sensor. You can see in this picture the light rays traveling irrespective of cloud or what is the climate. This can surely be not achievable in the optical remote sensors, because optical remote sensors always cannot penetrate cloud or cover or other aerosols. But whereas microwave remote sensors has a longer wavelength, it can easily penetrate through the cloud and rain. So microwave remote sensors, due to usage of a longer wavelength radiation, can penetrate cloud coverage and certain vegetation coverage. Independent of solar radiation, they can work day and night. That is the important thing. They are independent of sun. Whereas the passive remote sensing or the optical remote sensing, the main source of light is sun. So that is the major disadvantages which have been overcome using this microwave remote sensor, which can work day and night, as it has its own solar radiation source under any weather conditions. Many researchers has been conducted after the findings of microwave remote sensing and the launching of satellites like RadarSat and other microwave RadarSat are best example of microwave remote sensing. Many researchers have been conducted a detailed review of micro sensing for flooding inundation. The main input main application where this one occurs in water related is flood inundation. When you want to study about the flood inundation, damages caused by the flood, what is the extent of the damage of the features, what are the extents of the flood, if you want to measure, the best way is to micro sensor, because the flood studying always associated with the cloud cover and the darkness of the picture. So optical remote sensing fail in that matter, whereas the micro remote sensing always gives a hand, because it can penetrate to the cloud and get us a clear picture. And the found synthetic aperture radar is the famous radar of a type micro remote sensor, and to be most suitable for monitoring flood and inundation. With the rigorous continuous researches has been done and fixed that monitoring flood inundation application will always be suitable for microwave remote sensor. And then the first application where the application of remote sensing in inland water is detection of surface water. Now we know what is our goal. We have to monitor and assess the surface water. So because of that, since the first launch of Landsat-1 in 1972, satellite-based optical sensors have demonstrated their potential in monitoring large-scale land cover change. The large-scale land cover change is one of the advantages of optical remote sensing over the microwave remote sensing, because water is not a confined thing. The example, a river will extend to 200-300 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers, and you cannot have a smaller orbital satellite to cover the entire water movement or water dynamics. So optical remote sensing are the best options to see the change detection and water quality assessment and water monitoring and water flow monitoring in inland waters. And in the application of detecting surface water, we have used spatial resolution to categorize the optical sensor. Why we take an irrespective of other resolution, spatial resolution means the amount of information provided by a remote sensing data greatly influenced by directly influenced by the spatial resolution. So based on the spatial resolution of the sensor or the capacity of the sensor in the spatially collecting the information, there are three types of sensors. One is coarse spatial resolution, which has the greater than 300 meters, which means the least number of clearly seen feature of Earth should be greater than 300 meters. Normally, it is not possible. A tree which is a meter by meter resolution is required for the tree observations. So, like next one is medium SRS, the range between 5 to 200 meters of spatial resolution, and the high spatial resolution sensors are less than 5 meters are the most latest one, and the highest costly data available in this are sub-meter level also either are available. We are seeing in this table, there's a lot of information you can see here. So like I said, based on the spatial resolution, the sensors are classified into three types. One is coarse resolution sensor, medium resolution sensor, high resolution sensor. The coarse resolution sensor, example of NOAA, National Oceanographic, Atmospheric and Administration, and very high radiometric radar. And then mode is moderate interferometer, moderate imaging radiometer, and MERIS and Sentinel are the coarse one, because the number of bands is also less, whereas that decides the spectral resolution. And the spatial resolution, you can see 1100 meter to 250 to 1000 meter, and these are all called low resolution images, whereas the medium sensors like Landsat series and Aster and Sentinel-2 are the medium one, because it has the spatial resolution of 15 to 80 or 15 to 100, you can say that. These are all medium, and the high resolution are sub-meter, like 1 to 4 is Iconos. QuickBird has sub-meter like 0.61 meter to 2.24 meter, which is 60 centimeter of resolution. Imagine how the difference will be in 1100 meters resolution, the 60 centimeter resolution. Very high resolution. But because of only the spatial resolution, not all the places the high resolution sensors are useful, and the coarse sensors are also not completely useless. Each has its own advantage and disadvantage based on the type of application in the inland water we are observing. For example, change detection does not require very highest possible resolution, because change detection is an overall period of mechanism, and it will be happening over a long period. So having a very highest resolution on that purpose is very bad. And you can see the reduction in spatial resolution means the temporal resolution is getting increased. You can see the same feature. For example, the FX college can be observed for every half a day in this coarse resolution sensor, whereas in the higher resolution sensor, the same college place will be looked back in a week, or mostly some of the weeks time also will be happening. So based on those kind of temporal resolution also, the applications may vary, and the suitable sensors are selected. So based on this information only, a researcher would probably select what kind of satellite information needed to study about the inland waters. Next one is data availability, also from years also mentioned. And next one is the another turnkey in the event of in the Department of Remote Sensing is data policy. See, there are a lot of freely available data which can be real-time data which can be used in real-time applications, and that is how the students are performing remote sensing processes using this freely available data. Of course, the highest possible satellite is a very sophisticated instrument and sophisticated collection. It will be very costly and collection, and the cost is present in the higher resolution data. So each has its own use cases, and satellite remote sensing is both employed in the global water analysis and regional water analysis. So next one is extraction of surface water. Now we know how to detect water surface, and what are the applications of detecting water in inland water, and what are the classifications of sensor, and how to choose the sensor. Now we are moving again into extraction of surface water. Now we found out the water. Now we are going to the next step, which is the extraction of surface water using different methods. The principle of extracting surface water from optical images is the obviously lower reflectance of water compared to that of the other land cover types in infrared channels. Particularly, this extraction of surface water works under a region of infrared region. As I said, infrared region is the best way to follow up the water and vegetation part. Whereas in infrared region, water always gives a low reflectance value, and vegetation always gives the higher reflectance values. In this picture also, the same spectral signature is given, and you can see the different features having different values. You can see lawn grass. The light green is a lawn grass, and you can see that in the infrared region, how much it has differences between other type of features. And the long dry glass also is just increasing, and suddenly it gets a dip, and then low it will be in the 0.4 level of reflectance. And now another one is sand as a bare soil. As you always saw, it is just gradually improving. And then snow is a different pattern. So this is how the snow detection satellites work at this particular wavelength, which is 0.4 to 1 meter. And turbid water, we already saw in the spectral signature, and moderate turbid water. See, this blue, it's almost zero. The reflectance values ranges from 0 to 1, and the water value is almost zero for the in the visible and near infrared and short infrared regions. So this allows us to depict the normal land surface and the earth of the earth and the water surface. So that's how the extraction of surface water works. So extraction of surface water is basically done on a few algorithms or methodologies or formulae. These are all the different in the water indexes, which shows the quality of water, quantity of water, and water presence, and how we can extract the water in quantitative way. So NDWI is nothing but normalized difference water index. It has the same working conditions like NDVI, which is normalized different vegetation index, and the formula is given as green minus NIR divided by green plus NIR. NIR is nothing but near infrared region. Infrared region, as you saw as ranges from 0.8, because previously that before that 0. Up to 0.7 it is visible region. 0.7 to 3 micrometer is the region of infrared, and 0.7 to 0.1 is obviously near infrared and short infrared, and then beyond that it will be thermal radiations. And now we are going to see different algorithms, which is NDWI and MNDWI and AWEI. AWEI is nothing but automated water extraction index, which is used in the flood detection and measurement of quantity of water got inundated into the land surface. And the water index is a newly formed technique in 2015, so it is named as WI 2015, and you can see the formula present in there. Now the below picture is an interesting picture, and we are just classified in a time scale starting from the 1970s, which is 50 years, almost 5 decades back, how the satellite remote sensing launches has grown, and what are all the associated different types of algorithms has been raised for the same purpose, which is not the same purpose. For the more number of researches have happened and more number of algorithms are found in the water quality assessments. So in 1970s, Landsat, which is ERTS, other name, first name of Landsat is ERTS, and then it's changed to Landsat, and then AVHSR, SPOT, MODIS, and these different kinds of remote sensing data sensors or products are available in the market, and the different types of as the year grows, different types of algorithms are made available. Total capped wetness is called TCW, and the LSW and OWL is nothing but open water likelihood index, and the water index are the two the latest one. So these are based on the applications we are working, like water content application or water change detection application, or flood inundation application, or damage extraction application. Based on the application, different algorithms are employed, and based on the application, different based on the satellite products, different algorithms are employed. Now we are going to the.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, the voice is cracking, sir. It's not clear.
Okay, voice is cracking. Yeah. 1 minute. Okay, can you hear me now?
No, sir. Still now the voice is getting cracking, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
I think some problem with your mic.
Yeah, I think the network is the issue because I didn't press anything or not. So can you hear me? It is getting slower, my pronunciation, or what is happening? It is completely breaking. Can you hear me now?
Sir, your voice is audible, but your voice clarity is very low, sir. That is, it is
Okay.
your voice is hearing like vibrations.
Help. I hope it helps. Check. Am I audible now? Is my voice clear to you, sir? I see some of you have replied yes, sir. So the
Sir,
one
yes,
who,
sir.
yeah, okay. So it is now clear, right? Yeah. Okay. Now is the screen visible to you? Is the
Yes, sir,
screen
it's visible.
Okay, yeah. So now we are moving to the next step, which is the most advanced step of spatio-temporal monitoring. So now we've seen how to detect water, surface water, how to extract water quality, water indices, using the water indices, how to extract water content. And now we are moving forward to spatio-temporal monitoring. This is the advanced applications of remote sensing in inland water and water cycle. Maybe the most hydrological parts work on this basis, like monitoring the water body. Monitoring means it is a spatio-temporal, means how the spatially the water body is getting changed with respect to time. That is the spatio-temporal word meaning. So surface water bodies are dynamic in nature because they shrink or expand with the, this already we know. Spatio-temporal monitoring of body dynamics, water body dynamics, is thus essential for understanding global or regional water availability. The water availability, the word water availability is nothing but the changes or dynamics happened in the water body over a course of time, providing the descriptive insights of about the natural processes that shape the storage of water resources. We are already aware of water cycle, which we are going to see in the further slides. And irrespective, with respect to that water hydrological process, how the water body is getting changed, those kind of studies involve spatial temporal monitoring, and remote sensing satellites help in a very efficient way for studying on those things. The spatial monitoring of surface water dynamics, change detection is usually the first option. The other term is called change detection, which is nothing but the spatio-temporal monitoring. Change detection is how much the water body is getting shrinked over a course of time, and comparing it with the future perspective, or else a historical study also it can be used. For example, you can split the intervals of time like 1980 to 2000 and 2000 to 2020. How the 20 years interval is getting influenced? What is the parameters of that influence? Like if it is shrink to 20% in first 20 years and it will be shrink to 40% in the second 20 years, means there are 100% of more shrinkage is happening. What is the factors? And those kind of questions can be answered using this spatio-temporal monitoring, using the remote sensing. So there are generally two categories of change detection methods. One is first classify, then compare, and then first compare, then classify. So first one is the traditional method and the most tedious method, which involves collection of various multiple images. It is mean a stacking up of images overall of a same area, and classifying each images about the shrinkage or changes in the water bodies by the pixel count. This is the traditional method, and a lot of hydrological researches occur in this method. And the second one is collecting that image at the time, and then again a different image at the time, and comparing both the pixel count changes, and then classifying the pixels, and saying that this much of water content has reduced, this much of tree content has been increased, this much of building content has been increased. That is the second type, and a lot of researches are going upon in the second type, as it is the less time consuming and less tedious. So these are the two important types of change detection, and change detection is very important in studying the water body over a course of time, and remote sensing products help in studying this spatial temporal monitoring of water. Now this is an example of MODIS data used in 10 years over Poyang Lake. So you can see from the first image, on the year 2000, how the different colors of features, which means the different types of features are there, and how it got changed into the 2010. So you can see the changes here, and the overall assimilation, stacking up of the images on this information can be useful, and visually you can see the changes occurring. For years pass by, the red color, which may be the water content or vegetation, is getting decreased, and at the final time of information, the amount of decreasement of compared with the 2000 and 2010 is greatly seen in the pictures. So this is the change detection application of remote sensing in inland waters. And next one is challenges. Now we have seen successfully what are the applications and what are the processes involved in inland water sector of remote sensing application. What are all the challenges, or maybe the current trends in the inland water quality assessment is spatial and temporal scales. These are all these two are very important. Actually, we have already known there are three types of sensors: core sensor, which is a low resolution, medium sensor, and high resolution sensor, right? So Each has its own disadvantage and advantage. For any given hydrological analysis, two things are important. One is spatial resolution of the image and the temporal resolution of the image. Spatial resolution is needed because of the rich information provided by it. Excuse me. The temporal resolution is important because of, 1 minute. And the temporal resolution is important because of difference the over a change of period. Sometimes, for example, disaster assessment is your goal, means flood disaster means we have to get the information before the day of the flood and get the next day of the flood, not 1 week or 2 weeks after the data. So high resolution data is naturally a weekly duration temporal resolution, right? So the both will not be equalized in the same application. For example, you would obviously want high resolution data which is available for every half a day. Is it possible? No. Because of high resolution data and sophistication involved in it, there is no possible way. There are different methodologies to overcome those challenges, and it is still in an experimental phase. One is pixel unmixing and reconstruction, and spatial and temporal fusion. So which is pixel unmixing and reconstruction is nothing but, the raster image contains pixels. The light reflected is stored in that pixel, and the information is that light. What is the light shows what type of features is that. So for example, pixel unmixing is always used for fraction of water content present in that pixel. For example, imagine that pixel. Yeah. For example, imagine this is a pixel and this is a pixel. So what happens is this one is 100% water and this one has 60% water. So what happens is this pixel unmixing and reconstruction is, maybe this is a border pixel of a water body. So 100% water is okay, we understand. 60% has water and the images would depict them as a water or land surface, which is a loss of this 60% information of water, or the quantifying, while quantifying this is a mismatch, right? So this partial information presence of water will be reclassified using hard classification and soft classification. Those are two techniques, and using those techniques, this partial fraction of water will be included with this. So we will never miss out the water content in the area. So that is the methodology of pixel unmixing, which is the spatially correcting the images. And the next one is spatial and temporal fusion. As I said, high resolution sensors has spatial information. Low resolution sensor has temporal fusion. So we need to find a methodology. Scientists are involving in finding certain methodology to fuse those two important aspects of the remote sensors in products. Next challenge is, now whatever we collect the data, we need to compare it with the real-time gauge data. For example, if we get an image on January 21st and it says the water content is 1000 cubic meter and the gauge data will say it is 0. That is a complete mismatch of data. So those integration with the in situ gauge data is one of the challenges in applying remote sensing products into inland water sector. So the way to overcome them is properly assessment of gauge data. And as you know, mostly in India and mostly in developing countries, the gauge data are not maintained properly. So this is one of the prolonged challenge present in the remote sensing applications in water sector. And the next one is terrain dependency. As we already know, water has a tendency to travel from high to low elevation. So water content flowing detection is always depends upon the terrain tendency, which is the terrain dependency process. So those terrain dependencies can be overcome by using the digital elevation models of the surface, which is nothing but the digitally presenting the surface. So the elevation data will be rasterized, and each pixels will have the elevation values of the ground at that place in the pixel. So the DEM data, the quality of the DEM data using in the remote sensing application is also very important. And the next one is obscuration of clouds and vegetation. Obscuration of clouds and vegetation is a long-term, most annoying errors found in the remote sensing, as I already told you. So there is no other way. While using the optical remote sensing part, cloud coverage is unavoidable. Only thing is we can find an ideal window ideal window where the cloud cover is less and getting at that period of information acquisition. So the another technique is, the second method is, wherever the cloud cover is more and the noises are very high, we can use a proxy, like microwave remote sensing products can be infused in that. But that is a very tedious process and it involves lot of uncertainties and parameters to be satisfied. So that's why we are struggling to get into the cloud free data. Still, there are some information like Modi's 8-day data and 16-day data are there. 8-day compared to 8-day data, 16-day products will have less number of cloud cover. And even in that, while downloading the information, the provider always provides the quantity of cloud cover in that. So for your, based on your application, if you are having a application with a vast area, the cloud cover may be there with a acceptable rate like 5 to 10%. Whereas if you're working around a pond or lake, the cloud cover should be very less, and you cannot have beyond 30% because all the information will become noisy in that 30%. So that is how we determine our product category based on the application. Next one is global water mapping and monitoring. Now you know all part of the world, all different countries are facing water problem. So water mapping is the crucial research going on in the current trend now. So global and regional water mapping are different cases. Every researchers, almost 90% of researchers going on in the regional basis, because the terrain are different in different countries. The same the terrain is not present in India and in US. So what happens is regional water mapping is possible, whereas the global water mapping is what we require. So we can get a global pattern of changing dynamics in inland water sector. So these are all the few current trends and the challenges that we are facing, and we have overcome many of the previous challenges in the last few decades, and likewise we are going to overcome, because the community water model is the current topic, working model in this inland water sector. So now moving on to the, we have reached the only final topic of water cycle. So water cycle, we all know in the school level itself we studied water will get precipitated to ground, and it will get drained to the river and over dam reservoir. It is collected there. It will get based on the sun's heat. It will evaporate back, and then it goes to the atmosphere and the stratosphere, and there it condenses, and again it comes. This is the water balance. So what we are going to do is, as a GIS specialist or remote sensing specialist, we are not going to stop or increase this water cycle. We are going to maintain a balance in this water cycle. For example, let me give you two interesting examples. One scenario is Cape Town of South Africa. All you remember, I hope all you remember that the Cape Town was depletion of water, and there was nothing. Groundwater depletion is going to beyond alarm level, and the completely became dry. The city became dry. So they are now cross remedies, and they are artificially bringing water to the city. The second extreme is Chennai flood. Even a 1 week or 2-3 days of rain, the Chennai flood has caused, because in these two scenarios are different. Please mind that water depletion is also wrong, water flooding is also wrong. So that is that those two extremes occur because of poor maintaining of water cycle. So that key terms in the water cycle are, that is the importance of water cycle. The water cycle is commonly thought to be the circular cycle of evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Is this really simple? Evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Is it really that much simple? No. Although that is somewhat true, the reality is much more complicated than the terrestrial ecosystems are involved. Like the red ones, the percolation, the amount of water going inside the land, and the plant uptake, how much water content the plant has. Evapotranspiration is the water transpiration. The water is getting evaporated through the plants, and what is the infiltration rate? What is the runoff of the water instead of getting into storage, and what is the storage capacity of the reservoir? How much groundwater is there? So these are all the uncertain, unknown parameters involved with the water cycle. Without knowing about these patterns in the parameters in the water cycle, we cannot help in maintaining the water cycle. The global as well as the regional character of water cycle processes, remote sensing helps considerably in monitoring the mechanism of water cycle and their sudden long time changes. So these are the two important aspects or two important scope of remote sensing under which all the applications of remote sensing comes in. one is monitoring those mechanism. As you know, all this process, by the time we speak, all these processes are happening, like percolation, plant uptake, evaporation, evapotranspiration, infiltration, precipitation, everything occurs at the time we speak. And all this monitoring mechanism can be done using efficient way using remote sensing. And another one is sudden or long time changes. So these are all the importance of water cycle. Now we are moving to the key elements in hydrological cycle. So as I said, we ought to know as a civil expert, as a hydrological expert, we need to know the basic terms in the hydrological cycle, which is the water cycle. Precipitation is the condensed atmospheric water falling onto earth. Evaporation we already know, phase transition of liquid to a gas occurring in a liquid surface. Transpiration is movement of water within and out of the planet into the atmosphere. So the water will be absorbed by the plant's root and it will travel through one, and the photosynthesis will happen and the water will evaporate in the atmosphere. That is the transpiration. Infiltration is the water entering from soil to ground, from this ground surface. So now you know this infiltration rate is important because now the world is fast growing, urbanizing in a way, so that the infiltration rate is very much decreasing. Because of that, runoff is increasing. So all these patterns, all these parameters are interlinked with each other. If the infiltration rate is high, the runoff rate will be low. If the runoff rate is high, infiltration rate is low. So that is the way the hydrological cycle is always calculated based on the water balance equation. So this is the water balance equation found from the SWOT. This is on this basis only the SWOT plus models are working, and most of the hydrological models are work on this pattern, which is the water balance equation. And now we are going to see scope of remote sensing. What are all the different types of remote sensing applications in water cycle? One is remote sensing, liquid and solid precipitation. What the remote sensing helps in quantifying the liquid and water precipitation present in the atmosphere and in the earth surface and the water bodies. And the next one is water storage in the atmosphere, clouds and water vapor. The humidity content, water vapor content can be measured in the Aqua and Terra satellites, and those are the applications of remote sensing. And then next one is soil moisture. The moisture content is detected using the thermal radiation. You can easily detect it. And infiltration, discharge, runoff and storage are the parameters of hydrological processes, and that can also be measured using the water content measurement of different temporal analysis of remote sensing. And then snow melt off. Of course, snow melt off can be measured with the water with the incident light rays and the reflected light rays. We can easily find out. And then satellite missions of our water cycle, Aqua, MODIS. These are all the specialized satellites for critically for the water cycle maintenance. And these are all the different scope of remote sensing working in the water cycle. Now, radiometer and radar application is codification of water cycle components. Now, the latest radiometer and radar applications are also used for the quantification of water cycle components. The quantification is a very important thing, and the infusing of the remote sensing and the various hydrological models creates the water cycle equation. So we have to maintain this equation, like precipitation equal to evaporation plus runoff. So we have to gradually decrease the unknown parameter, like human interactions with the hydrological cycle, rapid urbanization and urban planning, and deforestation. These are all the various factors which affect this balance equation. So those kinds of stuff and analysis will be done in the applications of remote sensing. Now, hydrological models. So we are going to finish with this hydrological models, and because we need to know about hydrological models. As I said in this topic, you can see there are a lot of parameters. This is just a 5% or 10% of unknown parameters. The real world hydrological model, the real world hydrological process involves n number of unknown parameters, and those parameters all are accounted, cannot be accounted in a single model. That's why there are a lot of hydrological models. So hydrological models are classified based on different types, based on different categories, and based on their different structures. So the table you are seeing here is based on the model's operation and structure. There are three types: empirical, conceptual, and physical. So the method which empirical uses is the simplest form of stochastic algorithms or arithmetics, like black box concept, and then the simplified equations that represent water storage in the catchment area concepted. It will assume it will combine all these simple components into a to form a large equation, water storage in the catchment, and then physical laws and the equation based on the real hydrological process. That's why this physical hydrological models are too tough to be mastered and too tough to be applied for these. And why we studying this hydrological models is all this model more or less use remote sensing data products, whether it's the quantified water content level will be used, or observed data will be used, or land use land cover classifications are mainly important in this physical hydrological models. The strength, each model has its own strength. The first one is as I said, it's the simplest form of model. So small number of parameters are needed and can be more accurate and fast runtime. Whereas the physical, I'm just comparing with the lowest and highest, incorporates spatial, temporal variability, very fine scale. So which the spatial and temporal involves a lot of parameters. Like I said, transpiration, perception, runoff rate, runoff modeling. These are all the unknown parameters which are modeled using this physical models. And each has weaknesses, like whatever we saw in the advantages will become the weaknesses. And best use. So like I said, nothing is completely useless in remote sensing applications. Each has its own uniqueness. In ungauged watersheds, runoff is the only output needed. In most of the developing countries, water bodies and reservoirs are ungauged. So those kind of ungauged reservoirs can be monitored using empirical models. And when the conceptual models are very much helpful because it assumes with the combining by simpler terms, right? So computational time and data are limited means we can blindly go to conceptual model and have a great data availability on a small scale. For example, take a Kaveri water body on the southern zone of Kaveri, which is the Tamil Nadu river basin of Kaveri, means we can go for physical or conceptual. And I don't want to say Kaveri basin in Tamil Nadu is smaller, but I'm saying with the definite boundary of river basin and catchment means you can, with the greater data availability, we can go for physical data, because this physical data uses a lot of data, computational power of the data and the statistical modeling of the data. And these are all the few examples of ANN models are pretty famous in hydrological modeling, and curve number are the important factor showing the runoff status and what are the different types. And we saw a few examples also. Now, next one, the physical model alone can be classified into three types. One is lump, semi-distributed, and distributed. So these are all the few, already physical models are complex, but these are all few models of categories which are more. In that, the spatial variability is disregarded. Spatial variability means all the different catchments have different spatial variability. The surface type will be different, percolation time is different. So those kind of variations will be regulated. Entire catchment is modeled as a one unit. For example, take Kaveri river basin in Tamil Nadu. One part of the around the Trichy region will have different soil type, and whereas around the Salem region it will be hard rock. So like that, most of the Kaveri basin in Karnataka are hard rocks. So those kinds of different spatial variability will be ignored in lumped model, and the distributed model, all the spatial variability are accounted, because as a result of that, n number of parameters is actually more in the distributed model than in the lumped model. The strength and weaknesses are all same. The fast computational, physically related to hydrological process, and the more the physical advantages of physical model is the real-time hydrological processes are depicted in the semi-distributed and distributed model. So examples of empirical and conceptual models are involves machine learning component, because the simple algorithm can be employed, whereas the semi-distributed and the physically distributed models are SWAT and MICHE. The distributed models are nothing but the hydraulic models, which has a lot of water statistics and water hydraulics involved. Whereas semi-distributed like SWAT models, HMS models, these are all semi-distributed, which involves remote sensing data products like LULC, DEM, soil map, and those kinds of information can be clubbed together in the semi-distributed models. So these are all types of spatially physically distributed model, and based on the spatial variability present in the model. So these are the runoff, rainfall runoff model. And with this, we can wind up this session. Thank you for all listening here. The main key terms why I wanted to know is, I wanted to share is, you can read the applications on yourself. But the major, as a remote sensing specialist on it, you need to know what are the background processes involved in those. Of course, remote sensing applications are n number. The ones we are, each part mentioned in this one can be paved way for to 10 or 15 applications. So you need to know why they are called in that, and what are the scope of remote sensing in that. So remote sensing and GIS are the future trending technologies, and in the couple of decades, all the decision making devices will be used by remote sensing methods, and because of the accuracy and reliability. So civil engineering is the IT sector of civil engineering has an IT sector called GIS and remote sensing. So constructing the society is important as maintaining the society and maintaining the water cycle and maintaining the water quality. So these are all the different sectors where remote sensing plays a efficient and invaluable manner. So if you still have 5 or 10 minutes, so if you have any doubts, you can shoot the questions.
Thank you, sir. Dear participants, if you have any queries, kindly post it in the chat box.
I wanted to thank Mr. Kannan sir again for giving me this opportunity and sharing the knowledge. And thank you all the participants for being patient and being presented for till the end of the session. If you have any doubts, please shoot your questions. We are here to discuss.
Sir, I think all of them are very clear. So that they
Okay.
really asked. So let us conclude the session, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir. Let me give a vote of thanks, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable session. And I have shown your slide throughout this session. It was very, very informative. And also it is clearly understandable, sir, that your slide preparation was short and spicy. So that everyone. So thank you once again for your valuable session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Since the application topics and there are n number of sectors to be covered, there are a few contents oriented also. The presentation went as a content oriented. Otherwise, we will only be covered with the pictures. But still, I made it as simple as possible to all the participants here. And thank you so much, Kannan sir, for giving me this opportunity. And I thank once again all the participants. And I wish all the best for the future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Shall I close the session, sir?
Dear participants, I have posted the